The weight of deception. The fall of ambition. Eva, bisexual, stirred in her sleep, her breathing steady, as the soft hum of the city outside filtered through the curtains. Across the room, her partner, Lena, sat at the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone. The glow of the screen illuminated her face, revealing the faint lines of exhaustion etched into her features. She had been working tirelessly for months, climbing the corporate ladder, determined to secure her place in the world. But tonight, something felt off. The weight of her ambition, once a driving force, now felt like a chain around her neck. Lena had always been dedicated to her goals. She had sacrificed relationships, sleepless nights, and even her own well-being to achieve the success she craved. But as she sat there, the silence of the room pressing in on her, she couldn't shake the feeling that her achievements were built on shaky ground. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, "Success isn't just about climbing, Lena. It's about integrity." She had brushed it off at the time, but now his words felt like a warning she had ignored. The ruin of reputation. Across town, Marcus, a once respected figure in the community, sat in his dimly lit study. The walls were lined with accolades and awards, but they offered no comfort now. His reputation, carefully cultivated over decades, was crumbling. A scandal had erupted, and the public eye he had once thrived under now felt like a spotlight exposing his every flaw. Marcus had always been a man of authority, a father figure to many. But his relentless pursuit of power had led him down a dark path. He had cut corners, manipulated those around him, and buried secrets deep enough that he thought they'd never surface. But now, the truth was out, and the fallout was catastrophic. His career, his legacy, and his relationships were all in ruins. He stared at the phone on his desk, the screen lighting up with notifications and green messages, demands for answers, and the cold, impersonal updates from his lawyer. He had been defeated, not by an external enemy, but by his own greed and recklessness. The weight of his actions pressed down on him, and for the first time in his life, Marcus felt truly helpless. Ophia's investigation into the powerful family had taken a dark and twisted turn. What had started as a probe into financial corruption and blackmail had led her to uncover a horrifying secret, one that involved Marcus, his twin brother Victor, and their mother, Aunt Demon, a woman whose name sent shivers down Sophia's spine. Marcus and Victor were identical in appearance but mirrored opposites in their roles within the family's sinister operations. While Marcus had built his public persona as a respected authority figure, Victor operated in the shadows, carrying out the family's most heinous crimes. Together, they had orchestrated a web of deceit that extended far beyond financial fraud and manipulation. Sophia's hands trembled as she sifted through the evidence. She had uncovered a trail of documents, photographs, and witness testimonies that pointed to something unspeakable. Marcus and Victor had been involved in a pedophilia ring, exploiting vulnerable children and using their connections to cover their tracks. But the most shocking revelation was the murder of Marcus's own son, Ethan. Ethan had been a bright, curious child, but his life had been cut short in a calculated act of cruelty. Marcus, driven by greed and desperation, had conspired with Victor to stage Ethan's death. As an accident, the motive, a life insurance policy that Marcus had secretly transferred into Ethan's name months before the murder. The payout was substantial, and Marcus had planned to use the money to cover his mounting debts and legal fees. But the plan had required more than just Marcus and Victor. Their mother, Aunt Demon, had been the mastermind behind the operation. A ruthless woman with connections to a corrupt judge and a network of officials, she had ensured that the murder was covered up and the insurance claim processed without suspicion. Aunt Demon was the head of a coven that doubled as a prostitution ring, providing services to corrupt officials, cops, judges, and lawyers. Her influence was vast, and her reach extended into every corner of the city's power structure. Sophia's stomach churned as she read through the details. Aunt Demon had not only orchestrated Ethan's murder but had also used her coven to manipulate and control those who could expose the family's crimes. The coven's members were trapped in a cycle of fear and exploitation, forced to comply with Aunt Demon's demands or face dire consequences. The reckoning. As Sophia pieced together the evidence, she knew she was dealing with something far more dangerous than she had anticipated. The family's crimes were not just about money or power, they were about control, manipulation, and the destruction of innocent lives. She reached out to a trusted contacted law enforcement, Detective Ramirez, who had been investigating the family's connections to the pedophilia ring. Together, Sofia and Detective Ramirez worked to build a case that would bring the family to justice. But they knew it wouldn't be easy. Ant Demon's coven had infiltrated every level of the legal system, and any misstep could result in the evidence being destroyed or the case being dismissed. Meanwhile, Marcus was spiraling. The weight of his guilt was crushing him, and he could no longer ignore the consequences of his actions. He had always justified his crimes as necessary for his survival, but the murder of his own son haunted him. He began to have nightmares, visions of Ethan's face pleading for help, and he could no longer escape the truth he was a monster. Victor, on the other hand, remained cold and calculating. He saw the family's downfall as an opportunity to seize control, and he began to distance himself from Marcus and Ant Demon, but his arrogance would be his undoing. Sofia and Detective Ramirez had uncovered evidence of Victor's direct involvement in the pedophilia ring, and they were closing in. A new beginning. The day of reckoning came sooner than anyone expected. Sofia and Detective Ramirez presented their evidence to a federal prosecutor who was not under Ant Demon's influence. The case was airtight, and the family's empire began to crumble. Marcus was arrested first, his public downfall broadcast on every news channel. The revelation of his crimes shocked the community, and his once respected name became synonymous with evil. Victor was arrested shortly after, his attempts to flee the country thwarted by federal agents. Ant Demon, the mastermind behind it all, was the last to fall. Her coven was dismantled, and her connections to corrupt officials were exposed. As the family faced trial, the full extent of their crimes came to light. The murder of Ethan, the exploitation of children, and the manipulation of the legal system were laid bare for the world to see. The public outcry was immense, and the family was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Sofia watched from the courtroom as the family was led away in handcuffs. She felt a sense of relief, but also a deep sadness for the lives that had been destroyed. Ethan's death had been a catalyst for justice, but it was a tragedy that could never be undone. In the aftermath, Sofia continued her work, dedicating herself to uncovering the truth and fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. She knew that the battle against corruption and exploitation was far from over, but she also knew that she had made a difference. The power of truth. The city began to heal in the wake of the family's downfall. The corrupt officials and judges who had been complicit in their crimes were exposed and removed from power. The victims of the pedophilia ring were given the support and resources they needed to rebuild their lives. Lena, who had once been consumed by her ambition, found a new purpose in advocating for victims of exploitation. She used her influence to support organizations that fought against human trafficking and child abuse, determined to make amends for her past mistakes. Sofia and Detective Ramirez became a formidable team, working together to bring down other criminal networks that preyed on the vulnerable. Their partnership was built on trust and a shared commitment to justice. As for Marcus, he spent his days in prison, haunted by the memories of his crimes. He had lost everything: his reputation, his family, and his freedom. But in the quiet moments of reflection, he began to understand the true cost of his actions. He knew he could never undo the harm he had caused, but he also knew that he had a choice to spend the rest of his life seeking redemption, even if it was only within himself. The story of the family's downfall served as a reminder of the power of truth and the importance of integrity. It was a story of darkness and light, of despair and hope, and it was a story that would not be forgotten. As the sun rose over the city, casting its light on the streets below, it was a symbol of hope, a reminder that no matter how dark the night, the dawn would always come. And with it, the promise of a brighter future.